Hey, Tim Ditloff with Full Sail Leadership Academy. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the Quorum Leadership Podcast. Today, we're with Dave Baum of Ameriprise Financial Services. Dave's a wonderful representative in the financial services world, also a fellow sailor. And today we're going to talk about what investors can learn from sailing and what people in the financial services world can learn from sailboat racing. Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Tim.
So tell us about Ameriprise.
They are a terrific, smaller operation out of the Twin Cities, came out of American Express roughly 20 years ago. And I was attracted to their commitment to their people.
How long have you been in the financial services business?
I'd say all my life.
Really?
My dad was in the business. He started here in Milwaukee with a small firm, Louis, in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And so I grew up around it without knowing I was absorbing the lessons and some of the activity, I guess, for lack of a better term. But ultimately, I started in the late 90s. After college, after traveling around a bit, trying a few different jobs, there was an opportunity to join the firm back in Milwaukee, and I was looking forward to come back to Milwaukee in the Midwest. And so that was 1997.
Okay.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Still
Wow.
with it.
Awesome. What makes you passionate about that industry and helping people?
It's one that is dynamic, and therefore it's different every day. And the second part is working with people, and more specifically, individuals and families. And so I do get really close with others, and I appreciate the back and forth, and I appreciate the time that goes by and the things that change, that becomes important later in life that wasn't important earlier. And there's a certain satisfaction also of working with families through multiple generations. And I'll be honest, it offers a good lifestyle, lets me go sailing.
Yeah, exactly. So you talk about your tenure in the industry. What are some of the changes that you've seen in the industry, whether that be regulatory or the technology of bringing information to clients? What's changed?
The technology would be probably the most noticeable change. I believe regulations have always been there, and they come and they go, and any ethical person should be just fine with them. But the technology has offered challenges and benefits. More information. The business used to be very information heavy, and we controlled it. Now it's everywhere. And so that was a change. It's more, how do you use it, and how do you make somebody's time valuable and worthwhile to themselves? Meanwhile, you make a living for yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's gotten bigger. There's more competition. More people are involved in it. More types of industries are involved in it, whether it's retirement planning, banks, instead of perhaps just a simple investment house, but very dedicated to what its purpose is.
So with all the information out there, that's bringing probably a more informed consumer.
Yes and no.
Okay.
With too
I was
much.
going to ask if that's making it more challenging. How does that information add into the work?
As a financial advisor, you have to follow the information and keep track of it. The opening is there's so much of it, now some people are very willing to work with somebody else and just not worry about that part of it in their lives if they have a trusted source. So it's like a lot of things. When there's a lot of noise out there, there's an opening to make it simpler and dedicated, as long as you're, I would say, a trusted person. I've always been interested in current events. I've always been a reader, history buff, all those things. And so for me, that's always been part of what I like to do anyway.
So you guys hear doctors complain about, quote unquote, Dr. Google and people diagnosing problems and whatnot via the internet. Do your clients come to you with questions because they're reading things on the internet?
I encourage it.
Great.
That shows engagement to me, that shows interest. I also like for my clientele to be informed, maybe over-informed, but once I know we're informed, then I think we have a good base to go forward. And I think they have an understanding more of who I am. When I'm, helping them with their assets, I'm actually leading them towards their dreams, I hope. And so I do want that closeness. I do want that understanding.
That's got to be so rewarding, helping someone accomplish their dreams. You have a story that sticks out of someone that really had a big, hairy, audacious goal and they met it because you've helped them out?
I would say it's working with people that have hopes that their business might work and that in fact it worked out in magnitudes more than they could ever imagine. They put the right pieces in place.
Yeah.
They had their idea, but they weren't just going to stick to it themselves. They're willing to work with other people that may have a different expertise or give them more time to work on their expertise.
Yeah.
And that's where I like to position myself.
And that's got to be really rewarding, just seeing a multitude of different businesses and how they run and what makes them tick.
That feeds my sense of curiosity, yes.
Very cool, very cool. Well, speaking of curiosity, we share a common curiosity about making a boat go through the water just powered by the wind and sailing. And we also share a common passion of actually racing sailboats. So when did you get into sailing, and when did you get into racing, and how did that all come about?
I love this subject, and I could probably talk for days, but I really started at camp. I went to Camp Manitowish YMCA near Boulder Junction, Wisconsin, and that was a platform to be introduced to a variety of activities. Ultimately, they had to kick me out of the sailing shack because I wanted to go there every single time and keep sailing. From there, I came down to, back in Milwaukee, the Sailing Center, the Community Sailing Center was pivotal in feeding my sense of adventure and giving me skills to feel good about that adventure. And it was later then that I met a fellow by the name of Don Crysdale, who is my number one racing mentor.
Yeah.
And he then introduced me to the soling. But before that happened, there's another member here at the Yacht Club, Bill Denny, and his worker, August Lerkind. And I bring him up because one of the reasons we named our son August was after this man.
Oh, wow.
And he took me to Racine. We came back through a storm, and I was 13, I'll never forget it. And he said, now you're on your road.
Wow.
And the second piece of that was, there was a man from the Netherlands affiliated with this person, and he said, Lake Michigan is challenging, but you're not a sailor until you sail the North Sea.
Wow.
And to that end, I did sail in Norway this summer.
Oh, wow.
And on the North Sea.
Nice.
And it was a good honor to Uncle Peter, as I call him.
Sailing the North Sea versus Lake Michigan?
Remarkably similar, except in heavy air.
Okay.
The heavy air, the waves were much more powerful, but it was gorgeous.
And what type of boats?
This was in the soling.
Okay, so for the audience to understand, a lot of people that are just maybe occasionally seeing sailing on TV, they're seeing Sail GP with the big foiling boats, whether they be a catamaran or America's Cup boats, now monohulls, but still foiling, or even a sailing yacht, as some would call it. But a soling is quite a different boat. Tell us about the soling, what makes it unique.
Designed in the mid-60s by a Norwegian, it was developed as a 3-person race boat to be a bit more accessible than some of the older, bigger boats that were then popular in the racing scheme, and ultimately became tested for the Olympics, along with another boat, the Etchells. And they trialed the boats off of Kiel, and ultimately the Soling won. And so from 1972 to 2000, it was an Olympic class. But it's a 3-person boat. Everybody has a dedicated role, but I would say it works best if everybody knows what else everybody else is also doing. Because inevitably you get drawn one way, and like any team sport, you need support if you're going to go help somewhere else. And you need that support. And so I've been doing this since the mid-90s, and I think that's why. It's because every single time the 3 of us are trying to figure out a better way to handle an unknown situation.
Yeah.
And that sort of comes back into the investing world. It's an unknown situation fundamentally.
Yeah.
Racing is very much the same way. But through repetition, you can find patterns that really work and be confident in what you're doing and how you're going at it. And so it's not exactly a pleasure boat, but it is a tinkerer's dream. Mm-hmm. And it's just a wonderful, it's a very maneuverable boat. Some of these other, I'll say more casual boats you see, they're not as responsive or acceleration, any of those things. It's really peaked on that, and it's easy enough to handle. And so when I got started, it was a boat that not only could I physically handle it, but I could financially make it go. There is maintenance, there's update, there's travel if you want to do it. But I also say those are all the positives to it. I can travel. I've been lucky enough to sail in Europe, in South America, North America, and I use it as sort of a travel guide. Oh, where's the next big event?
That's awesome.
And at the same time, when I go to those events, I'm seeing people over and over. And so I have fostered some wonderful friendships of people all over the world. And we may or may not be able to have a good conversation because of language, but we can always enjoy the competition on the water.
Well, I know just in our own Wednesday night racing against you guys, well, not against, because you're in a totally different class. It's always amazing sailing on, in essence, a cruising boat, racing on a cruising boat that's motored out to the race course, and here you guys are slugging it away against wind and wave without an engine on the Soling and sailing back in. So hats off to you guys, you Soling sailors, because you guys are true sailors.
We do carry 2 canoe paddles.
That's true. That's true.
But no electronics, no motors.
6-foot wave, and that does a lot of good. Wow. So what has racing taught you about running your financial services practice?
Preparation, patience, perseverance. Honestly, those I would, when you asked me to do this, those were the terms that, those are the themes that keep coming back, and I think it's what keeps me going. You need all of them. It's not just, you can luck out buying a stock that goes up, certainly, but can you do it repeatedly? Are you comfortable putting your retirement that way? I mean, these are different levels of how you handle an investment. And just like with sailing, I don't want to go out in 25 knots of very strong wind with waves without a crew that's ready for it. There's not a lot of room for error at that example. But it's also it's a platform that every day is different, so it's encouraging to get out there and try. Whether it's a beautiful light day, it could be a heavy sunny day, but it could be raining as well. We've done it, I've done it in a variety of conditions. I have also done some long distance races, and that to me is just another complement to my day racing and the Soling. And there, again, it's the teamwork. You must trust those that are around you. And particularly when you're going offshore, you start to look around and you realize you're the only people that can get you there, solve a problem, and keep it fun. And I guess I want to also encourage the concept of having fun. Both investing and sailing should be fun in the sense that it's enjoyable. There's some mystery and some unknowns, but it shouldn't be seen as overly dangerous, overly, you got to be a super expert to do it all the time. That being said, if unknown, trust somebody else. And that comes back to, again, my sailing world, as well as the investment world. I've had mentors throughout my life, Don Crysdale being one. But I've been very lucky to have people introduce me to the act of sailing, the sport of sailing, and I've gotten into organizing big events. I'm also the vice president of the International Soling Association, as well as the U.S. treasurer. And so I've been involved with the administration side of it, interactions as we bring world sailing ideas through the fleet. I believe we're one of 11 classes that are up to full world sailing standards. So that's a very big trophy for us. And it's very meaningful, and we appreciate what that means. And what it means is committee structures, we get inputs, and we adhere to principles to create fair racing conditions. And frankly, we don't budge. And I think, again, some of that adherence in the investing world is important. You kind of have to, you're not always going to find the best stock in the world, and hopefully you're not going to find the worst one, but you got to be prepared. And sometimes you just tolerate it and know that's part of the game as well. I admit, I hit a rock this last Sunday, and I haven't hit a rock in 10 years, but I did. Although it's going out to the shop.
That perseverance. that you talked about in sailing, I think, again, in the investment world, especially in uncertain financial times, has got to be a lesson that you have to be able to relate to your customers. Is that true?
That's very true, and different people, what you would think are similar people with similar situations will still come up with different conclusions in terms of what's impactful in their lives. And it behooves me to listen to that. This is their money, their dreams, their family. And if one wants to go super aggressive, that does not mean everybody else has to do that. And I think I come back to a lesson my dad taught me, which was investing is not a contest. You want smart investing, but how things come together are for very particular reasons. And it's not a contest. We're not here to go against an index per se. You might want to judge like me, I judge against a gold medal boat out there.
Right.
But I'll never get there either. But my point is, it's just not a contest. It's for people, it's your own goals, your own dreams. And just like with sailing, I'm a middle of the pack person in the World Championship. I'm perfectly content with that. And do I want to do better? Absolutely. But I have to recognize I'm not at the Olympic levels that some of these other top teams are, and they've been working longer, harder, arguably. So, but it is perseverance. Stick with the plan, but also be willing to modify it a bit, because things do, present themselves differently.
Yeah. Obviously, it's an election year. I mean, you can't even pick up your cell phone without getting spammed by some political party. A lot of uncertainty in the economy. If you listen to economists talking about, are we going to have a soft landing? Are we going to have a depression, as some people have even said in the political world? How does that make your job challenging? How does it impact the clients? And again, how do you take that sailing wisdom and bring it to the fore in an uncertain economic environment?
Because it's the future, anything can happen, from the most extreme to the most benign. And so I will listen, but tend to shelve much of the chatter as political competitive talk. Yes, the depression is a very real thing that can happen. There are signals that can develop, they can take times to play out, and they can get changed over time as well. And so I think that's back to the patience. I stick with a lot of the research, which investing wise, your best outcome is divided federal government, because not a lot will get done, and what does get done tends to be a little bit more in the middle. The problem, I believe, in this current time is people are a little tired of not addressing issues that have been ongoing. And so to that end, I could see where having, sort of a one-party government, even if they make a whole bunch of things that I don't agree with, at least it puts something in motion to perhaps come to a better solution over the long run. But that's a tough pill to swallow, and I'm not sure how much I really mean that, but I just know that's a possibility. So it's, again, to me, it falls under that information overload. And also listening, and again, to the extent that somebody isn't going to completely shoot themselves in the foot, we go with it. And sometimes that means being too safe.
In the racing that I do in the jam fleet, the jib and main fleet, so to speak, even just sailing for pleasure on a Saturday or Sunday, sailors always have some type of contingency plan. How do you build contingency plans into portfolio management for a client, or how do you encourage that with your clients?
If you know what your expenses are, you know really what you're aiming to have at any given next 3 months or something. So that's an immediate goal right there. How would you access that in immediate terms? I think as you get older, that number gets bigger. I think there's a sense of anxiety and just your desire for more safety, and arguably at that point you are protecting assets more than growing them. But it's also, again, back to my role is the communication, and not to give up, but to be ready to move should certain other things happen. It's being prepared ahead of time. For example, if a person is going to do a very big purchase, I would much rather see cash in the account a couple months ahead of time than 2 days before. The risk reward is way skewed to me. If you mistime that down 20% right before you buy your house, is not a good feeling. And I come back into the mid 2000s with the financial crisis, where you might have a portfolio down 50%, which relatively was normal. If you just did nothing, within about a year, a little bit more than a year, you were back to your value again. But I'm just going to say it this way: if you sold out because you were worried that this was going to get infinitely worse, then there you were stuck. Meanwhile, the market, the climate could come back. And that comes back into the 80s with high interest rates. At some point, the government cannot continue to fund 18-21% debt. That just wasn't going to work. So why not then buy it on the retail side? And those bonds paid off for their 20 years or so. And that was an amazing investment back in those days. So there is always, this goes back to sailing too, you got to look for there's always something good in the bad. And be willing to act on it. I think there's a willingness to act, and I think that comes back to sailing, particularly racing, where the immediate decision of I got to clear out somebody else's bad air, for example, or I can see something developing over here, I need to get there first. You don't necessarily want to wait for everybody else to do it, then it's too late. You get no advantage from it.
Right.
And that will apply in the investment world. But again, not everybody there's no contest here, right? It doesn't have to be super aggressive, and maybe that's just of interest. I also like to think in terms of, for beginning investors, be less aggressive than you think. Even though everything you read about says be aggressive, you're young, you'll earn more money, this, that, and the other, there's a psychological component, which is you want to grow a nest egg. And it is really powerful if you can start in the 20s instead of in the mid 30s. Grow it, then take a percentage and be super aggressive if that's what you think you want to do. But you still want that nest egg, I'll call it, to be able to have the benefits of time and maybe the structure of an IRA or something to let it grow, as opposed to you go through your 20s and you end up sort of even. You could have used that moment to grow and then let that compound over time. And so that's one of the other things I kind of find interesting. And I say that a lot to the younger new investors that I talk to, is that I'm sure you want to swing for the fences and do everything brand new, but it also comes with risks, and arguably you're really trying to grow your nest egg.
You talked about just a moment ago about getting off of a course, changing course. In uncertain economic times, potentially, how are you preparing your clients that, hey, we may need to do a course correction?
Just talking about it.
Okay.
I ask people a lot, what are you concerned about right now? Both positive and negative. I think those are both informative topics. And I think, again, emphasizing everything doesn't have to be variable. Everything, you can buy fixed income, you can have cash positions. But it comes back to communication, simple communication, being prepared for the possibilities. And I'll go back into the sailing world. We're coming up to a mark. Are we going to be going to the starboard ley line? Are we going to try to come in on the port line? What does that mean for once we go around the mark? How do we set our spinnaker? Where's the competition? How do we get away and get in some clean winds so that we can go faster? It's looking for the most likely outcomes, not all of them, the most likely, and prepare for those. And always acknowledge, just be ready for something else. And that comes back to the communication on board to be able to make a quick decision. We made a very quick decision last Sunday in a race, and we tacked which turning the boat through the wind, ahead of everybody else, and it was our winning move. That one move, we got the benefit of that tack. Everybody else did not. They actually got hurt by not tacking, and that built our lead, and we kept that the rest of the race. And that was just a gut feeling, and it was also, I can't just follow somebody else. And that's also true in the investment world. You can't just follow everybody else.
Yeah.
Arguably, and Warren Buffett would admit as much, you want to buy stocks that are out of favor. They just they're not getting the attention. They're not, the newest fad out there. And I was fortunate. I actually came into the business when the internet companies were being developed in the late 90s.
Wow.
And I saw that entire sector get invested in, only to have, we'll just say, a handful of them sort of make it now.
Yeah.
But they're the companies now that everybody relies on.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, just a tremendous number just never succeeded.
Yeah.
And that was a real eye-opener because everybody was excited about the internet. I mean, I was introducing email to people at that time. That's where we were at. Everybody was excited, and everybody was right that it was going to get bigger. But the incorrect problem, the problem then became not everybody was going to succeed. And every great idea wasn't that great in the end. And the market and our marketplace allows those to come up, allows them to maybe succeed, but also fail.
So we talk a lot with leaders within our work with Full Sail about taking care of their people. You obviously take care of your crew very well, but leaders also have to take care of themselves, manage a lot of stress. How do you take care of yourself?
Good habits. I hope they're good habits.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, that's good eating, it's regular physical exercise and training, and it's spending time with people that take care of me. Mm. And that's maybe the selfish side, but it's recognizing that component. There are people that help me relax and enjoy life. There are others that kind of get me jazzed up, and and it's what do you want when? But having that sense of home is vital to me. I grew up in a very stable home, and I just have that within me, and that recenters me, no matter what else is going on. Mm. And I have a son. I love spending time with him, encouraging him in his activities, and seeing him flourish. And that to me is not time and energy. That's life.
Yeah. We always talk about you can't lead others if you can't lead yourself well.
That's very true. I've been a ski patroller too, and so there's in the first responding world, you have to be very hard-nosed that if you get involved, are you creating a bigger problem, mm-hmm. or are you actually helping solve mm-hmm. another problem? Mm-hmm. And that's a very tough lesson because sometimes a little bit more time goes by, but you must survey the situation to make sure that you're just not going to compound the problem. Mm. Now, and that's something I work very, very hard at, either setting up or just being realistic about what my own skills are. Yeah. I have my own limited abilities,
right?
And I have to be very honest with myself of when I can do something or not. With like sailing, probably one of the things I've always appreciated that we are basically on our own to make that decision. Do you race? Do you sail or not? Mm. There's no one telling me I can't go out there whenever. Mm-hmm. I need to do that on my own. Is my boat ready? Is my crew ready? Am I ready?
Sometimes it's not really great being the race director because I was the race director where we'd have to call off those races, and yeah,
and
you can never make racers happy, any given Wednesday night.
But you have the staff, you have the race committee, volunteers,
True.
or staff.
True.
You have group assets. You're not just answering for me or you. You're answering for the community, yeah. and I respect that. And as a racer, I thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't do race committee anymore, but I lost too many hairs when I was doing
I know the feeling. I've done it too.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. I want to thank you for your time. If our listeners or the people watching this want to get a hold of you to learn more about whether that's soling racing or actually having them help you with their investments, how do they get a hold of you?
I'd say email is the best.
Super.
Tim, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
David, thanks so much.